All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Ridgey. I am the Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We want to thank you all for joining us for today's panel discussion about how to respond to summonses from New York City enforcement agencies. We have a really excellent panel that will be giving you a lot of really critically important information, and we'll also give you an opportunity to ask questions and have those questions answered. So first of all, today, what you'll really be learning about are the resources that are available to businesses, so you can learn how to stay in compliance with the changing rules and regulations. You'll learn how to work with the city through a new and really innovative program to help avoid complaints and avoid enforcement. And you also hear from Oath, which is the city's administrative law court, on what to do if your business does receive a summons. Today, my panelists are Ariel Palace, Joni Kletter, and Ray Kramer. First, Ariel Palace is the Senior Executive Director of New York City's Office of Nightlife at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Ariel is a lifelong New Yorker, a nightlife professional, and she came to the role with a really deep experience both in nightlife as well as community building. And that ranges from owning her own bar, Sutra, to serving on Community Board 3. Next up, we have Joni Kletter. Joni is the Commissioner of the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, known as Oath. The week of her appointment was actually the same week the city shut down due to the pandemic. So I guess happy anniversary. And thank you for all the great work you've been doing over the past year. It's been quite a trying time. Prior to joining Oath, Commissioner Kletter served as the Director of the Mayor's Office of Appointments and also the first Deputy Director and Counsel in the Mayor's Office for City Legislative Affairs. Last but not least, Ray Kramer is the Executive Director of Center for Creative Conflict Resolution and Director of the Administrative Judicial Institute at the New York City Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, which is Oath. The center serves as the city's government's central resource for conflict resolution and restorative justice practices. So now, before I turn it over to Joni, just want to let you know we're going to go about 30 minutes, and that will be followed by a Q&A in the second half of today's presentation. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature, and we will do our best to get to as many questions as possible. This is also being recorded, so we will have it posted online. And with that, Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Hello. I just got a message that my internet connection is unstable, so I might be going out of service for a minute, in which case I'll call back on my phone. So I apologize in advance if that happens. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us. We know this is a really difficult time for all New Yorkers, especially small businesses and restaurants and bars. And so we want to be proactive about getting information out around what Oath is, what we do, and answer all the questions that you may have. For those of you who don't know much about Oath, we are an impartial and independent administrative tribunal, and we adjudicate the summonses that are issued by over 20 enforcement agencies throughout the city. So that includes sanitation, health, consumer affairs, NYPD, fire, buildings, transportation, among others. And generally, in a normal year, there are about 800,000 summonses that are issued every year. And about over 200,000 of those get processed for a hearing at Oath. And those are folks who challenge the summons and request a hearing before one of our hearing officers. And as Andrew said, I started at Oath the same week that COVID was shutting the city down. And we immediately transitioned from in-person hearings to telephonic hearings. And it has worked incredibly well. It's been very successful. We've allowed anyone who wants to challenge a summons can email us, schedule a hearing on a date that's convenient for that person. And they can then challenge the summons from the convenience and safety of their own home. and they do not have to come into one of our offices and wait in a waiting room and then go into a small hearing room to challenge a summons. So we've made it super easy and convenient for folks to challenge a summons. On average, we dismiss about 40% of the summonses that are challenged by respondents who come to our adjudication or administrative tribunal. So we encourage anyone who believes that they've been wrongfully issued a summons by an enforcement agency to challenge that summons. And if we find that the summons was not served properly, or that the agency has not proved their case at a hearing, we will dismiss that summons. And then if you're not happy with that outcome, you can appeal to our appellate review panel, and we will review the hearing officer's decision. We also have an incredibly robust help center, and Jean Wesch, who's our ombudsperson, oversees 25 people who provide one-on-one services for anyone with a hearing before the oath tribunal. And we will provide you with information about what documents to bring to the hearing, what arguments you should be making at the hearing, how to file an appeal, how to file a motion to vacate a default judgment if you initially did not show up for your first hearing. So we can provide you with a lot of incredibly helpful information before you even walk into the room for the hearing. So we encourage you to reach out to our help center, which we can put in the chat. We will put the email address, and you should always feel free to reach out to us with any questions you have. This past summer, I also launched a dedicated small business help center unit within our help center that's dedicated specifically for small businesses that have concerns and issues and questions about a hearing. So feel free to reach out to us at our small business email address, which we will also post in the chat. We have also worked really hard to become more technologically innovative. So we're now offering text message services. And if you want an update on your case or any information, you can just text us and we'll put that in the chat. Include your summons number and we'll provide you with automatic updates on your case. Finally, we recently launched with the Office of Nightlife and Ariel Palace a new program called Mend NYC. And it's a new innovative initiative to provide free mediation services specifically for small businesses that are receiving complaints from their neighbors around quality of life disputes like noise and garbage, as well as disputes that a small business might have with their commercial landlord around rent. And we will offer free mediation services to try to help you resolve that dispute, come up with a compromise, and work proactively with your adversary to reach an amicable resolution, which Ariel and Ray Kramer, Judge Ray Kramer is here, will talk a little bit more about. So I'm going to hand it over to them to talk a little bit more about Mend and about the work that Ariel Palace is doing with the Office of Nightlife. Thank you.
Thank you, Joni. Appreciate it.
Ray now, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Ray. Thanks.
No worries. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for inviting us to be here. Thanks to Andrew and to the Hospitality Alliance for hosting this event. So I'll talk a little bit about our Center for Creative Conflict Resolution and how we came to be and what we do. And then I'll kick it over to Ariel to talk more about the Mend initiative that Ariel really piloted and then brought to us to collaborate on. But a little bit about the Center for Creative Conflict Resolution at Oath. It was launched officially in August of 2016. We're a small team, there are 8 of us, 6 of us, though, are trained as conflict resolution specialists, as mediators, as restorative justice practitioners. And the mission of the center has always been to serve as a city government-wide central resource and support for all city agencies and employees around conflict needs. And to be a support for city agencies and employees in both internal conflict, workplace conflict, but also community-facing conflict, where government is called on to manage conflict or may be involved in conflict. The mission of the center: how do we support, provide direct services, consult in any conflict situation that a city government may be involved. The first 4 years of our existence, we focused on, and we continue to focus on internal workplace conflict for city employees. And just so you get an idea of what's involved, city government has about 330,000 employees, incredibly diverse, placed in some 70 plus agencies and offices, 95% unionized, and all of those folks are stakeholders in our conflict center, and we've been able to form relationships with many of them. The idea is that in government, when there's workplace conflict, which conflict is normal and it occurs, when there is workplace conflict and people get stuck in that conflict, there are formal processes to resolve it, like disciplinary proceedings, grievance proceedings, equal employment opportunity discrimination proceedings, but those can be costly and they're typically punitive in nature or focused on enforcement. So the idea with the center was, can we create additional interest-based options, get involved early when employees are stuck in conflict, and to offer them other processes to see if they can work through that conflict, saving time and money and resources, and also giving employees some voice and control over how their conflicts are resolved. And the idea is better engaged employees should translate to better public service. So that was the idea. We spent the past 4 years building our relationship with city employees and agencies and leadership. And we offer a range of conflict services, and they include mediation, conflict coaching, executive leadership coaching. We offer training and workshops customized to agency need, but around conflict skills, using mediator skills in the workplace, restorative approaches and how to use those approaches in the workplace. We get involved. We found that when employees are in conflict, they impact a wider group of employees in their unit, and we've become more involved in helping work units and work groups work through conflict. We use restorative practices in the workplace, like restorative circle, to address conflict, build teamwork, improve communication. And we also get involved where agency leadership is interested in dispute system design. How do we help an agency look at conflict across the agency organizationally? Where maybe there be gaps in the response to conflict, and how can an agency design and implement a mediation program or restorative practices program? So that's the work we've been doing, and again, mostly focused internally to city government. And then two things have happened in the past year. One is that Joni arrived as our chief judge a year ago, has been terrifically supportive of the center and really encouraged the center to use our skills and our approach and our focus to also assist city agencies in community-facing conflict. So we really began to look at ways in which we could support folks like you all and small businesses or members of the community using these same interest-based conflict processes like mediation and restorative approaches. And that led to the collaboration with Ariel and MEND, which I'll let Ariel talk more about. And then the other thing that's happened and more recently, and we're really excited about, is in recognition of the work that the center has done over the last 4 years, and in recognizing as the city comes out of the pandemic, as we try to heal, conflict will be present, but there are constructive ways that we may engage conflict, not just default to enforcement and fines and punishment, but are there ways in which we can constructively increase communication, increase sense of community, and work together to resolve conflicts more creatively. So in recognition of the work we've done so far, and with that interest in mind, the mayor signed Executive Order 63 on February 18th, which made our center permanent as the city government-wide central conflict resource and support for city agencies. So our team is thrilled about that development. It requires agencies to appoint an alternative dispute resolution coordinator to work with us to refer things to us for services as needed, but also to consult with us as to how each agency might incorporate mediation or restorative approaches in their internal work, but also in their community-facing outward work. So we're really excited to work with the different agencies, particularly those who are in the community and working in the community, and again, called on to manage conflict in the community, to help them find more interest-based ways and creative ways of resolving conflict. So with that, Ariel, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about our collaboration on MEND.
Thank you so much, Ray. And thank you, Andrew, of course, and to Commissioner Kletter for inviting me to be here with you guys today. It's such an exciting program that we get to work on together, and I think has really helped to reframe and redefine the city's approach to quality of life and conflicts in general in the city, where historically there has been a real enforcement response when we really find that neighbors, whether it be businesses and residents together, really just need to communicate to avoid the escalation that takes place, and bringing it to unnecessary levels of enforcement when there are so many other ways to resolve it. And so very grateful that we have collaborated in this way, and I think is setting a precedence for the city with conflict resolution in many other ways moving forward. For those of you who maybe don't know, I am the first executive director of the relatively new Office of Nightlife, which was established in 2018 by the tremendous dedication, I think, and help from the Hospitality Alliance. It wouldn't have been created probably without a good 20-year push to create it. It was part of a global movement. There's over 50 offices of nightlife around the world now, and I think it really speaks to the importance of having a dedicated representation inside the administration to make sure that the industry has a seat at the table, which is really why we were created. A lot of people don't know this is a non-enforcement entity, so you can feel safe coming here knowing that we're here to, I like to say, reinforce the industry into compliance and assistance rather than enforce. The purpose of the office has really been to also help to find systemic problems and creative solutions in order to help make nightlife more fair for the operators, fair for the workers, to make it safer, more equitable, accessible, and that it works for all New Yorkers, really. And so we've known that historically there's been a lot of issues that are unique to nightlife and life at night, as we like to try and broaden the perspective of what it really means. And pre-pandemic, it was really about helping to support and navigate businesses through the bureaucracy and try to improve it, helping to preserve and elevate nightlife culture as a high art, not a low liability, and help to improve quality of life, which is sort of why we help to, as a former operator for 10 years, knowing, and I think anyone listening on this call can attest to the power of one anonymous chronic complainant and the damage to a business and the time and the money that can lead to stipulations and even revocation. And I think historically, what has been a relatively organic process of complaints, right? I like to say back in the day, people would, go down with a bat and come up with a bottle of wine when they had a problem with the bar downstairs. Now it's been automated, almost over automated to the point where you're just calling a number anonymously. And when people get a complaint about sound being too loud. You don't know the nuance, when, where, how, why, what's the impact. And it really prevents the operator from understanding the nuance of the nuisance to be able to make meaningful improvements. And also, I think it prevents the operators and the neighbors from having a relationship, right? People feel intimidated. Oh, I don't want to complain face to face. It's better that they don't know who I am. I'm afraid of retaliation, which is an interesting fear that we've learned, that people are afraid to confront the bar downstairs. When, I mean, hospitality owners have so much to lose, millions of dollars on the line, so many employees who depend on them for a livelihood. And it's their life's dream. Why wouldn't they want to resolve an issue with the upstairs neighbor? They love people. That's why they're in hospitality. So the creation of the Office of Nightlife, I mean, the creation of MEND was to address that, mediating establishment neighborhood disputes through communication and compromise, and to help to remove the need for enforcement immediately, right? Obviously, there's always bad apples, bad actors, and actually bad complainants, right? And things can, and if need be, can escalate to enforcement. That's always an option, but it shouldn't be the first course of action if the bar or restaurant downstairs is getting on your nerves, right? And it really does, I think, hopefully give respect to the operator, to give them the benefit of the doubt that they do care about what's going on in the residential community around them. And so again, I'm just extremely grateful to Commissioner Kletter and to Ray Kramer, and the actual existence of a creative conflict resolution center in New York that is being utilized in a way to help these businesses and community, and to sort of get at least this issue as we move out of the pandemic, and even now more than ever, with everything being outside, open streets, open restaurants, open culture. And then once we get back inside, this is an issue that deserves a new approach and a creative, more mutually respectful approach. And so I think it's also important, and I'll end with this, is that it's not just waiting for the complainant to come to you. If you know you have a high 311 call count, or you know of a chronic neighbor, that operators can also reach out to MEND and say, I have an issue with a neighbor that I want to resolve, to help to prevent it from unnecessarily escalating and all the red flags going up. So this is a tool for operators as well, not just for complainants, to help to stop the chronic nature of the calls. And I'll just say, the Office of Nightlife is here for you. We partner with Andrew. Andrew's out there fighting the good fight on the outside. We're here on the inside. And our greatest strength is to be able to say to the administration, to the agencies, what we're hearing from the industry is, right? Our greatest strength is hearing from you, so we can amplify your needs and concerns and even your great ideas. So go to nyc.gov/nightlife. We've hosted over 10 town halls throughout the pandemic for business owners and individuals to survive through this. And we'll keep going until we'll just keep going. So thank you again. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yeah. Andrew, do
Great.
you want to?
Yeah, thank you. So first, I just have a couple right here. I guess the first one would go to Ariel, and everyone's free to chime in as well. But can you explain more about how men can help with issues with the landlord if a restaurant's trying to negotiate their lease to account for reduced occupancy?
Negotiate. Well, I think I'll probably pass it on to Commissioner Kletter to answer, but the idea was to expand the program to be able to encapsulate these rent conflicts with their landlords through a communicative, non-legal, expensive process. But Joni, why don't you continue?
Yeah, no, I think that answered the question. And the goal is really to use men to help small businesses in any way where we can be helpful in resolving disputes using creative methods. So the rent issues, arrears, back rent, future rent, we know that these are challenges that many businesses are facing. And so to the extent that we can be helpful, and we're obviously not going to be the right outlet for everyone, right? Some people are going into litigation, some people are able to resolve it themselves, but there will be some small businesses that feel that mediation is the best course of action, and we can offer that service for free. And I know we've done a couple since Men launched. So Ray, do you have want to give like an example of the type of case that we've seen in the landlord-tenant context?
In the landlord-tenant context, one example was a small business that had been, renting space for some 15 years from owners. There were 3 owners, and there was a long-term relationship. I mean, conflict really occurs in the context of relationships. So we tend to think about conflict really transactionally, like what are the issues that need to be resolved. But our approach includes focusing on the relationship, and if that's been impacted, how to rebuild that. And when that gets focused on, some of the issues that are in dispute tend to be more organically resolved. So the example that I'm thinking of, we weren't able to ultimately help them come to agreement, but at least got them to the virtual mediation table. Our services are virtual at the moment, where they talked about a framework for how to potentially renegotiate and or extend the lease. And there was interest in having this discussion before anyone before the moratorium was lifted and before anyone went to court. And that's our society tends to default to litigation as a way of resolving conflict, and it comes with, time and expense and cost. This was a group that wanted, because of the relationship, wanted to have a conversation, but have a neutral facilitator help them have that conversation and think about what kinds of things they needed to resolve to potentially renegotiate and or extend their lease. So that's an example of a commercial lease dispute that came to us. I think we've broadened Men to offer free mediation services if there are business to business disputes. I mean, sometimes there could be conflict between small businesses over space or outdoor setups or whatever the nature of that conflict may be. We're here to help with that also.
So let me just follow up on that. I guess probably any of you can answer, but if someone is a restaurant's having some issues with some neighbors, maybe it's about noise, maybe it's about the outdoor dining, how should they best contact Men, or do they reach out to the person who's filing the complaints? What does that process look like?
Yeah, I could say, so we have a website, the Men website. We can give you the link if we haven't already. Oh, I think Marissa put it in the chat box. And we're trying to make sure that people in the community know about the program and what we do. So typically someone emails the Men link and lets us know that they are interested in mediation. There's a conflict with a neighborhood establishment, often around, as Joni said, quality of life issues like sound levels or crowd control or sanitation. I believe that if folks called 311, they would also direct those folks to us. We're getting more and more, as Men is becoming more visible, we're getting more direct emails to our website. And then we have an outreach team that would respond, contact the person who emailed, make sure they understand what services we offer, get information as to who the other party is. So if it's a community resident that first reaches out, then we would talk to that person and then reach out to the bar or restaurant that may be involved, or against who the complaint is being lodged. And then let that establishment, the owner, know about MEND and the benefits of mediation and see if they're willing. And then once our outreach team has done that initial outreach, it's kicked over to my team at the center. We'll have individual conversations with the owner of the establishment and with the community resident to more clearly prepare them for the mediation and for the conversation that's going to take place. And then we'll schedule a time virtually, send a Zoom link or a Teams meeting link or whatever is accessible. And the parties with the mediator will be on the link, like on Zoom. And typically the mediations last up to 2 hours, but it's a facilitated conversation where owner of the restaurant and or bar and the community residents share their perspectives, what their concerns are. We try to help them reach an understanding first of what each other's concerns are and perspectives, and then it's a collaborative brainstorming on what are ways in which we might resolve, our differences. And often what we find, I think Ariel was speaking to this, is when people actually talk to one another in the right environment and we prepare them for the conversation, they'll figure out how to resolve their conflicts faster than any of us, and in a way that tends to be more durable because they know what's going to work best for them. So we have a conversation about what's going to work, and ultimately we get resolutions where people exchange phone numbers, agree to, creative ways to reduce sound or redirect speakers to eliminate sound or whatever is required. And then there's a written agreement or a verbal agreement that we capture in an email to resolve it. And Ariel's office will follow up with support if needed. And if the agreement breaks down, folks are willing to come back. So that's a quick overview of the process.
Very helpful. So next, maybe just for Ariel, I know you and actually some others on this call joined Mayor de Blasio somewhat recently up in my neighborhood on the Upper West Side at Moonrise Izakaya, the restaurant, to talk about the MEND program. So that was really great explaining how it worked. But what have been some resolutions that restaurants or bars and communities have agreed upon?
I mean, I just think it's such a personal thing, everybody has a different, obviously we have like the DEP noise decibel readers and what's like, the legal limit on sound, but that meter on what irritates you is very personal. And it could be only at 2 o'clock in the morning, the bottles, when the bar backs bring the bottles outside and it hits the sidewalk, that drives somebody crazy. Or somebody has a bench outside and it just drives them crazy when people are sitting on the bench and having a conversation for 3 hours right underneath their window. So I think the whole point is about the nuance and how granular people's personal grievances are and the potential solutions that they can come up with. And obviously, I think it's important to note, and I don't know if it's been mentioned, that these are confidential, right? So you can feel free to have a mediation agreement, and the details of that will never be made public. It's meant just for those 2 or 3 parties to identify what it is and identify the solutions. It could be about moving speakers or hanging them so they're not sitting right under somebody's floor. I'm sure anyone could think about the vast amount of things that irritate a person and the possible solutions that you could come up with. And it's a personal matter. There's no, I don't think, I don't sit in the mediation rooms, although I was certified, and so was Joni, to make sure that we understand the mediation process. It's very personal. And as long as people find common ground, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, because I think what's really interesting is that there have been a lot of mediations around noise and
which we call sound.
sound, excuse me, around sound. Um, and every agreement that has been reached has been different, and it has been unique in its own way, and has been resolved in a different way. And it's really dependent on what the parties' needs are and how they've reached that resolution.
And how long does the process take? I know you talked a little bit about the process, but usually you had mentioned one meeting. Are some of these mediations taking multiple meetings? Does the process from the restaurant or bar contacting Mend to, dealing with the situation, coming with a resolution? Are we talking a few days, a few weeks, a month, 2 months?
Yeah, Ray can answer that one.
Yeah, I would say our goal is either a business or a community resident reaches out. Our goal is to try and get through the process and get the parties together in the mediation room within 2 weeks if we can. Now, one of the things that slows us down is just being able to reach the party sometimes and have the preparatory conversations that we want to have. But it's not meant to be a lengthy process. We know that people are, experiencing conflict and it's uncomfortable. So the sooner we can reach out, tell them we're here to help, and prepare them for the conversation, and then bring them into the room. If we can get them in 2 weeks, that's the goal. And then the sessions themselves, it's whatever is helpful to the parties, whatever they need. Typically, they've been one session, not more than 2 hours, because what we're finding is, these are folks who want to resolve their own conflict. I'd say on both sides, the community resident and the owner of the bar, the restaurant, both understand, the need for peace and quiet in one's living environment, but also the need to survive economically and how important businesses are to a community. So, once we get people together and they start to talk, mostly it goes pretty quickly, and people are both empathetic of one another and supportive and willing to be flexible in the resolution. So one session is typical, but if there were particularly entrenched conflicts and people needed to spend a little more time unpacking that, we're happy to schedule a second session and follow up as needed.
Thank you.
I just want
Go
to
ahead.
add one thing, Andrew. I think it's also really important to recognize that it's not about resolving the problem and now it's fixed and now the bar is going to be quiet forever and the neighbor's never going to complain anymore. Like, I don't think that's based on the reality of what life is like living in the city. The point is about establishing a respectful and communicative relationship so that when the next time that person is irritated, they feel free and confident to contact the bar or the resident, and they are establishing a long-term communication and relationship. The expectation shouldn't be like, well, now everything's resolved and perfect. It's really about resolving and healing and mending the relationship. And more so than even just that one little thing that bothered somebody.
Got it. Well, that's good, because that kind of leads me to the next question for the commissioner. So if a business participates in Mend, does that also mean that the city is going to forgive summonses, or are they going to get some sort of credit for participating in the program?
I mean, the credit they're getting is a good relationship with their neighbors, and hopefully having neighbors who aren't going to call enforcement agencies and 311, but rather have a direct relationship, right, with that small business. So unfortunately, no. And I should add that Oath is not, we are independent, as I mentioned at the beginning. We have no connection to the enforcement agencies, and we don't make any decisions as to who the enforcement agencies will be targeting. So we adjudicate the case, but we are not involved at all in the enforcement process. But our goal is to have these folks call Mend instead of calling the enforcement agency. And now, as Ray mentioned, when you call 311, there's also an option to go to mend as opposed to filing the complaint with the enforcement agency. So it's another tool in the toolkit. And I would encourage folks who are small businesses and are concerned about enforcement agents to reach out to Small Business Services, because they have offered a number of different programs, including a consultation, a one-on-one consultation, where they can identify potential violations that you might be targeted for. And I think it's a really great service. So they're doing a lot in terms of offering resources for small businesses. So I would encourage you to reach out to them.
Great, thank you. And so right now, if a business does get a summons, I believe the oath offices are closed. So how should they contact oath to do a phone hearing, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, we can put the information in the chat. You can just send us an email and make a request for a hearing date, and we can schedule your hearing on a date that's convenient for you.
Great. And are
Yeah,
there any
it's
plans?
actually pretty amazing, I have to say, because we've now done over 110,000 remote hearings, and
Wow.
I have not received any complaints either from the enforcement agencies or from respondents regarding this new adjudicatory process. So I've been really just very glad to see. It's been a pleasant surprise to see how well the telephonic hearings have been working. And I think,
Interesting. You
yeah,
know, a lot of things have changed, obviously, during the pandemic, and everyone's always asking about, what changed now that's going to continue through post-pandemic. Is there any plan to continue remote hearings when everything's happening, back in real life?
yeah, it's something we're considering for sure, for sure.
Great.
Especially for cases that are small fines, like
Mhm.
sanitation cases, where it's $100 ticket, and most people don't want to spend half their day traveling to an office and sitting in a waiting room to adjudicate a $100 fine. They'd rather just have a phone call. So for sure, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I just want to say, the MEN program is something that we had been advocating for a long time. And it's really great to see the city take an active and collaborative role to make sure that our restaurants and our nightlife, which will slowly come back, but it will come back, have a resource there to really work through these issues. Because at the end of the day, our nightlife makes New York City so special, but being able to sleep and having a good quality of life when you're living in the city is also critically important. And this is just a really wonderful way to go about dealing with these situations. And like you all explained, often by having those conversations and working through them, you can find a resolution, and then you can have ongoing conversations and find ongoing resolutions to different issues. So I definitely commend you all for that. And oath and the way you brought everything online and more than 100,000 hearings. I mean, that's pretty incredible stuff. So definitely want to thank you for all the work that you do, for all your support and partnership. And just wanted to give everyone, a minute or two for any final comments or thoughts to leave our attendees with.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for hosting us. We really wanted to be here to make sure that people are aware of the services that we provide, and ask you to please share this information with your colleagues and friends and neighbors, because we think it's such an important service, and it's brand new and it's been going well. So we want to get the word out. So we appreciate everyone's help in getting the word out. And hopefully we'll all be meeting in person soon and be going out and celebrating together the successful launch of Men. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Ariel?
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. I think, it's really important to think ahead and to think about the reopening and the recovery and the opportunity to rebuild better, and to really take an approach that respects, supports this industry in a way that is, again, through non-enforcement, but in supportive measures. I think this whole experience has shown exactly how valuable this industry is and what it provides and how fragile it is. And so again, I'm just really grateful for the partnership that we've been able to create, mend with Oath and with the Center of Creative Conflict Resolution. And I think creative conflict resolution really is the name of the game moving forward on how we can restabilize the industry, so that we can be less vulnerable and more sustainable moving forward. And again, just to make sure it's being given the support and respect it deserves, and that it needs. So thank you again.
Thank you. And Ray.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you again for having us here. Yeah, I would just join in the sentiment that we're happy to be part of this collaboration around men to offer this service to businesses and to community residents. One way of thinking about something like men is there's no real downside to having a conversation. You're not required to resolve a matter, and at the very least, you walk away with understanding if it doesn't work out, whatever other options you have still exist. But it's proving to be a fairly effective and quick way to work on conflict. So we're happy as a center to be able to support the community and to support small businesses. And I would say if there are other kinds of conflicts that are recurring or that you're experiencing, we're really open to brainstorming with you all as to how we might help and provide these kinds of interest-based, constructive ways of resolving conflict, collaborative ways. So if you have ideas or thoughts or want help around, conflicts that seem to be recurring, and you want to explore other options, we're here to do that. We're here to be of service. So thank you all, and thank you, Andrew.
Great. Thank you, Ray. Well, on behalf of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, I want to thank Commissioner Kletter and Ray Kramer from Oath, and of course, Ariel Palace from the Office of Nightlife. We hope everyone found this helpful and informative. We again thank all of you for the work that you're doing. We'll certainly take you up on that offer to stay in regular communication so we can also resolve issues that may be impacting the industry, between the industry and city. So we will make sure to share this with folks. And I know there's a lot of good information that was placed in the chat. So definitely recommend, if you're watching, to jot that down. You can also reach out to the New York City Hospitality Alliance or the folks on this Zoom to make sure that you have the contact information when you need it. So thanks again. Want to make sure everyone utilizes all of these programs that are available to them, and hopefully we'll see you very soon, and hopefully in person. So thanks everyone. So long.
Thank you so much.